Pixel Podcast with Curtis, myself, Ricky, and Chris. And it's funny, when we talk to the community, the biggest thing of everybody that everybody wanted to talk about, there was like a million different conversations people wanted to have. And the number one is how gaming in the YouTube collecting world, the retro collecting scene, has changed from when it started till now. And I think we can all agree, even without any sort of thinking, the biggest thing that's changed is the other question that we kind of had, it links right into it, is reselling accepted in the collecting world? And before everybody jumps in and goes into it, I think my little precursor story is that when we were around back in the day, collecting and reselling, being a collector and being a reseller was not okay. Plain and simply, it was not a thing. You don't do it. It's not even a question. You just don't do it. And then there was this giant period of that collecting scene on YouTube where that's what you did. And then I'm going to credit it. I'm going to start by crediting it. I think the shift, there was this gap. There was people who resold, and they were kind of the no-no people, which we're looking at Chris, which also
Filthy.
A collector. But
Filthy is what it is.
Well, we'll get there. But it was like this, you were either a collector or you were, not even a reseller. You were a reseller scumbag. That's kind of how it was back then. And I feel like the retro Rick era came in, and that's kind of when it was like the shift started, where there was like a bridge in between the gap where it was like, oh, he's a collector. Look at the stuff around him. Look what he does. Look how much fun he has doing this. And wait, he has this series that I think credits to what blew him up kind of, is the $10 game collection challenge.
Yeah.
He's reselling. He's doing a reselling thing. And I even myself was like, that you can do that? That's like that's where I think the majority of the internet started to be like, we can do both, right? They were kind of affirmed, because in reality, most people were doing that at the time anyway. So I want to jump in. The reason, again, we have Curtis here, who's a little bit younger. We have Ricky here, who's a kind of like the expert with me, have been on YouTube for so long. But the main reason I wanted Chris here is because you are a lifelong collector with some of the greatest stuff I know, but you're also been reselling the longest, because you're not just a reseller, but you've been around owning stores and in that scene. So I'd love to hear from you first, before everybody else jumps in, kind of like the process of when you saw, how were you treated, which I've heard stories before of people not selling you stuff because you're a reseller, to where we're at now, how big of a shift and all that.
Yeah, so I've been a reseller I've owned my stores, so technically an official reseller for probably 12 years now is when I opened the store initially. Okay. And but prior to that, I was a gamer, collector, grew up collecting comics, so been a lifelong collector as well. But when I opened my first store, I was surprised immediately, like right away, there was a community of collectors, like the people that would come into the shop. And then there was me, and I immediately felt like I was like an outcast. Like people would come in, they would buy stuff, but they were like, oh, you're a reseller. You're like not one of us. And I would try to explain to people like, no, I'm a gamer. Like I've been doing this. I'm not just here to make a buck. But I definitely felt like excluded from the community initially. I think it took me like years of kind of like building up a reputation, hosting like events with the community, running Retro World Expo, before like finally the community was like, oh, you are one of us, even though you resell. But I certainly felt that initially. Like there was definitely like, oh, you're an outcast. You're like a filthy reseller.
And I know exactly how that feels, because it's like I just went into it full resell mode, right? Because I didn't have much to collect. Yep. I didn't have any money growing up, so it was like, how would I collect things? And then I'd move, and then I'd try to figure out like, how do I attain these things without losing a lot of money, right? Because I was broke growing up, so it was like I had to resell to get the things I wanted.
Interesting.
And
I think you come from a very special place that's different than us, because we've kind of, in some way or not, kind of, Ricky and I more so in the YouTube bunker, so to say, like in the YouTube world. That's kind of where he came in. You kind of aligned with it. People know you through that. A lot of people know you on YouTube. Russ worked with you and stuff. You kind of were aware of a lot of the people on YouTube who resold conventions and that, but you kind of came in like not in the YouTube world at all. Nothing. You're just an average dude, to where this idea of reselling being bad was foreign to you.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost like, what are you talking about?
Well, I was just a YouTube junkie. I just take in YouTube nonstop.
Yeah.
But like I was just full resell mode. Like I was just like all about the money right now. And then I was like, well, I really love these things, but now I came into a place where I was like, oh, like I can start to actually attain things that I love.
Yep.
And still make a little bit of money. at the same time. And I didn't feel bad about it at all because I honestly didn't have money even when I was reselling. So it was more like,
yeah.
So
you
do
know
you
what I mean?
collect now? Or you
Yeah,
collect,
yeah, but I am very particular on the things that I do collect. Like I'll grab things, and I love the fact that like I can go out and then find things, and then just like bring it to the community and like show it, and then I don't know what else to do with it, right? Because it's like I don't have a lot of space.
So I was kind of initially like that as well, where I was, when I opened the stores, I did not have a big collection of stuff. My collection of stuff is way bigger now than it was initially.
Yeah.
So I kind of did start, like I collected a little bit, like I had a little bit of an NES collection when I opened the stores.
How come that's everybody's first? Like that's, I feel like YouTube and like, I feel like YouTube itself, besides reselling, was like built on the NES. I don't know if that's like a credit to AVGN, maybe possibly, but I feel like everybody in that space that was like, dude, I started collecting. It was like, at least back then, it was like NES.
That was our background when we first started.
Yeah,
Literally,
I was 5 years old, got my first NES, so that's like my true passion. So that's all I was really collecting initially. But man, over the years, now I'm collecting all sorts of stuff: comics, vintage clothes, games.
That's a deeper wormhole that we could go into.
Clothes, yeah.
We all, I think all four of us, maybe some of the most guilty, and maybe at Retro Rec too.
Yeah.
Some of the most guilty with. It's funny how like there's games that I'm like, and I've been collecting games for 10, 11, 12 years where I'm like, dude, I would have never spent more than like $50 on a video game or $100 max. But when we went into shirts, it was real quick from 0 to 60 of being like, dude, I'm not going to spend more than $20 to me being now like, dude, that only sold for 400.
And
that's not that bad.
Is still going on. I mean, it was just even yesterday, like we were looking at a shirt that it's like $500. I'm
Well,
like, I'll drop 500. No, that's like nothing. I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem.
How much did you? I mean, this isn't flex hour. All of a sudden, how much? I mean, real talk. How much did you spend on that Super Star Fox weekend shirt?
$450.
What about that hat?
I don't remember on the hat. I think it was like $80 or something like
Which
that.
is a good
That's
deal.
deal.
I was like, dude,
That's
this
a
is
good
great.
deal.
Which everybody listening right now is like, you guys are idiots. That's not cheap. I'll justify, and if this goes off the rails, that's okay. I'm going to justify clothing with the fact that like there's say a pretty rare Nintendo game, pretty rare. One of the rare. Little Samson. You can go buy Little Samson at almost any convention, right? Every video I edit for Retro Rick, Phoenix Resale, might do stuff for myself. Every convention we go to, we see a Little Samson, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's expensive, it's still obtainable. But half of Ricky's shirt, you can't buy it.
You can't find it anywhere.
It's not on the internet. It's not available. It doesn't exist. And if it does, it's like one. And I think that's the big difference that I think a lot of people don't understand with like the shirts that we're into and the hats and all this different stuff. It's like these are like on a different level of like rare because a lot of this stuff is stuff that was like, hey, Walmart had like a special weekend in 1993 where that weekend they demoed Super Mario World and we made shirts just for that weekend. And it's like, some people think that's stupid, but to us, I'm like, it's funny because I'm not wearing one right now, and I felt like shamed when I walked in the park.
I shamed you immediately. I was like, what is that?
He got out of the car, he looks at me and goes, what? No flex? And I was like, my fear was that we were all going to be wearing black shirts, and I was like, oh, these are black, and I'm like, shoot, we're all gonna be wearing black shirts, and this was the only one I had that wasn't. I had my Star Fox one in the queue and my Super Power Fest 92 shirt. That was my option.
I'm not gonna lie, I was like queued up like 3 last night. I was trying on shirts. I'm like, what am I gonna wear today? My wife's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh man, I'm just styling for tomorrow.
But dude, that's what's cool about the games. Not the games, but the shirts. Like you can flex. Like what are you gonna do? Carry around little Samson with you? Like, oh, look at me.
Well, it's funny because I've seen guys at conventions do that. Remember the guy? We saw a guy one time at a convention with a car. He was a super cool dude. I've talked to him since. Super nice guy.
Yeah.
But it was his way of flexing. He was carrying a cart around with, what was it, Super Metroids? I think he had like 90 Super Metroids CIB. And he was just showing everybody, and I was like, "That's all right."
Yeah,
that's his flex.
I think the what I find in like the clothing aspect is like it's almost like you can just pay respect to the things that you grew up. You know, it's like you can put it on for show for others.
Yeah,
and it's like everybody that sees that, like, oh my gosh, like I love Sonic, or oh my gosh, I love that like Nintendo World Championship thing right there. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that you just come back and you're just like. I wasn't even alive for it.
I
That's what's
just
crazy.
realized he's wearing double
Right?
Nintendo World
Yeah, this is
Championships.
right.
This guy's all.
So that's my thing now is I love to actually match these up.
Wow.
Like I like the Virtual Boy shirt I bought off of you.
Yeah.
And then I bought the Virtual Boy hat.
Yeah.
Biggest
And like
flex.
finding the two of them,
Flex, right?
finding hats is like near
Oh,
impossible
I know.
too.
I know.
So to match the two
Yeah.
has been kind of a thing I've been doing lately, which is awesome.